Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show, a podcast by SaaStock. Here we interview SaaS founders from around the world who've been there and done that, as they share the ins and outs of how they built their businesses, their operations, their path to securing investment, and more. Our mission with the podcast is to help you, the founder, learn how to scale your SaaS, maintain your well-being, and navigate the complexities of this ever-changing industry. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, and together we'll explore the good, the bad, and the ugly in the journey to SaaS success. Welcome back to the SaaS Revolution Show. I am your host, Alex Theuma, CEO, founder of SaaStock. Delighted to be joined today by Eoin Bara, who is the CEO of Tipple. Welcome, Eoin. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Alex. How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. It's crazy busy at the moment, but in a good way. I've got a short week this week. I'm off to a wedding in Barcelona, probably my first wedding in 15 years. So, I think some of my colleagues are a little bit younger than me, even though I probably look the same age as them. Some might say, but they seem to be going to 4 or 5 weddings a year, and I've kind of out of that cycle. But I'm going back. It's my brother-in-law getting married to a Catalan lady, so somewhere outside of Barcelona, and forget how expensive actually attending weddings are, because with the flights and the hotels and getting all the outfits and so on and so forth, it's definitely cost a lot. But I'm looking forward to it.
I think people go through phases in life where it's, first you're on to 18th, 21st, 30th, weddings, divorces, funerals. I think that's the kind of cycle of events in life.
Yeah. Well, I've been in a cycle of nothing, I think, for a long time. Maybe too busy with SaaStock, but hopefully I haven't forgotten anybody's wedding or declined any invites. But Eoin, it is good to see you again. Are you currently in Ireland?
I am, yeah. So I'm in Tullamore at the minute. Not in the office today. So yeah, back in Ireland.
Tullamore, the home of the famous Tullamore Dew whiskey. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. So Tullamore Dew, I think, is the second or third biggest Irish whiskey in the world. Okay. And it was distilled here, way back when. And then it left, I think, in the 40s or 50s. There was a lot of kind of things around prohibition in the US that did a lot of damage to the Irish whiskey industry. And basically what happened in the Irish whiskey industry was a lot of the distilleries consolidated. So the people who consolidated managed to survive the whole prohibition in the US, whereas the ones that didn't ended up going out of business. So that's why, up until recently, probably about 2005, there was probably 4 active distilleries. And now you've got somewhere around 57 at the minute.
Well, there's thanks for sharing that. There is a nice connection, and it's going to be an obvious connection between alcohol and SaaS and yourself and what we're going to talk about. And maybe people got a clue with the company name Tipple if they were quick to kind of listen in. But before we get to that, Eoin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Eoin Bara?
So I started off as a designer. So I used to be a UX designer. I ran an agency for a while. Did a lot of blue chip clients. We worked with Intel, Goldman Sachs, Vodafone, Aer Lingus. Yeah, a load of kind of good blue chip customers. We're a UX agency. And I kind of got to a point in my life where the software world wasn't fulfilling me in terms of what I wanted to be able to do creatively. So I decided that I would do a side hustle and do something with my hands. And that was either going to be coffee, hot sauce, or boots. I was out one night with a friend of mine, and she says to me, she goes, "Oh, do you do what you love?" And I was like, "Well, no, I don't, but I get paid really well." And she says, "Well, what do you love?" And I was like, "Well, I fucking love gin." And I had a glass in my hand. And I was like, "How hard could it be to make?" And it turns out it was way more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
Everything is way more difficult than we think it's going to be. So I love it. Coffee, hot sauce, or alcohol, and so I guess you chose alcohol, and then obviously from what I understand, you launched your own gin brand or distillery, right?
Exactly, yeah. So back in 2015, I started looking into how to create gin, and after that conversation, at the time, craft distilling wasn't really everywhere. So went looking for training courses. The only place I could find training was down in South Africa. So I flew down to South Africa to do my training and bought my still down there and then flew it up. But in the background, started working on the design, the branding, all of that sort of stuff, the name. And More was the name of the product. So More Irish Gin, it's still going today. So More, it comes from the word big, and Tullamore, which is where I'm from, is Tullochmore, which means big hill. So the idea was to make it out of Tullamore, and to kind of make something that reflected like my experience of Tullamore of growing up here as a kid. So I used to walk along the canal with my granddad, and we would pick blackberries, and like my granny would make blackberry tarts and things like that. And then like we'd be up in the mountains during summer and there'd be raspberries growing, so we'd pick raspberries. So they were kind of the two things that were like really sort of like I associate with like my childhood in Tullamore. And I was like, how can I make that into like an expression in booze, without it like tasting terrible? So I spent about 18 months now, yeah, thereabouts, and figuring out the recipe of what I wanted it to taste like. Made the product. So what I made was a gin that was very much a traditional gin. So it like tasted like juniper, had spice from the coriander, then had a hit of rosemary, but then had a sweet berry finish. And because we used natural berries, it didn't taste synthetic. It didn't taste like you added cordial to gin. And it went really well.
And you said it's still around. More Gin is still around. But you're, I think, no longer running the company. You are a SaaS founder now. So how did you kind of make that leap? Why did you make that leap? And perhaps that can segue into the founding story of Tipple.
Yeah, so what happened was back in 2015, doing the side hustle of the gin, I got approached by Amazon to go work for them as UX designer and kind of lead the internal tools of how developers solve problems in the AWS network. And I actually said no to the job, I'm pretty sure about 3 times. But they kind of came back and said, look, there's a lot of challenges in this. This is a really difficult problem to solve. And I think when I heard that it was a difficult problem to solve, I was like, okay, well, look, let's kind of explore this a bit more. So I worked at Amazon from 2015 to 2019. But all at the same time, I had the side hustle going. So when I left Amazon, More was the 4th biggest gin in Ireland. And it was sold across 9 different countries. It was in the UK, it was in Ireland, it was all over the place. But I wasn't fully working on it because I was like at Amazon during the day. So I decided, hey, I should probably take this seriously and leave this job and go full time at it. So in 2019, we're like looking how to expand our markets. And I managed to convince Laura, who's one of the co-founders of Tipple, to leave her job and help me build the business. So we were kind of like going, okay, well, this is so difficult because we've got to go to a distributor who then goes to a retailer, and then we have to build demand on the other side. So it was B2B to B2C. And you're just kind of going, this is really, really difficult. All the while, we had people that were coming over from Germany or coming from like far places, coming to Ireland, going, I love your product. Can I buy it back in Germany or in Austria or in France? And we're like, oh, well, we actually don't have a distributor for Germany. Can we buy it online? And you're like, oh, no, the tax thing is really complex. Can't do it. And then we were like, okay, well, why can't we do it? Because we were doing it in Ireland and UK in 2019. But the idea was that we had a warehouse in each one of the countries and there was no cross-border. So the initial idea was, well, what about if we put like a warehouse in every country that we want to sell into? And then we're like, well, then we're going to have, 27 different amounts of stock. We're going to have 27 different integrations into warehouses. We need a VAT registration in every country. We need to basically have accountants do this. And we're like, this is going to be incredibly expensive. So then the question was asked, why can't we do cross borders? Why can't we just have one warehouse and sell it from there and just have it arrive in another country? And that turned out to be a really complex question because even though in the EU, we kind of simplified VAT rules so you can have a one-stop shop and do your filings, there's nothing like that for excisable goods. Also, all the excise rates are completely different in every country. So when we started like figuring this out, and it kind of took us about 2 years to figure out how to actually do it legally, logistically, and compliantly. And then we went, this is going to cost us quite a bit of cash. And it seems like a lot of work for one company to do. But if we're having this problem, other people are going to have this problem too. So I reached out to my network, reached out to a couple of distillers. I was like, hey, if you were able to sell online, would you be interested? You know, and like everyone was like, yes. I was like, would you pay, 99 quid a month? And they were like, yes. I was like, would you pay a commission of like 12, 15%? And they were like, yes. So when we kind of worked back on the commercials of it, it was like, well, the brand is actually coming out with 100% more than they normally would. We're coming out with a margin, and this is win-win for everybody. It also means that instead of going, you have to go to B to B to B to C. That's a tangled twister there, right there. But you're now just building demand directly from your consumers, right? And in the alcohol industry, when you're building like brand awareness, you really can't track how effective it is because you're not the point of sale. So you can't see what's converting, what's resonating with people. And kind of social media opened up to, you're now able to engage with your customers. Before you would sell to a distributor who'd sell it to a bar, and you'd only see a depletion report. You wouldn't know what it was being sold or who your customer was. So the opportunity there was like, we were building infrastructure at like Amazon. Why couldn't we build infrastructure for the alcohol industry? So I reached out to Jamie, who's the other co-founder of Tipple. And I said, hey, Jamie, I know you're still at Amazon, but I want to talk to you about something. So two of us sit down in like this hotel lobby. I'm telling him all about this problem. And he's like, no, man, like surely someone like Diageo or something has this solved. And I was like, no, this is an incredibly difficult problem and it affects the entire industry. So Jamie goes off and thinks about it and like has a look up, and he comes back and he's like, yeah, no, this is incredibly complex. Let's do it. So I was like, great. So there we had the three founders ready to go. And then we started building. So we had to go out and raise a little seed round. So we kind of thought it was going to take us about 400K to build this, maybe 300, 400K to build. So we raised a small seed round of about 400 grand. We did it in 30 days. So I went out on the 1st of March. We came back on the 31st of March, and we were oversubscribed. So I think I came back with 1.1 million on offer. And I just went, okay, no, we're only going to take the minimum that we were going to do in order to kind of get this up and running. And also, like, I think if we had taken on too much money, we would have had more people, more pressure. And there was a lot of really complex and out of our control. So I think it allowed us to kind of build the way we wanted to in terms of like doing it right from the start and just building an MVP. This is infrastructure, like it has to work first time every time. So and it's tax as well. So if you get tax wrong, like it's really expensive. So yeah, we did that, and I think it was the right way to go.
And that was, and when you talk about those days, the 1st of March and the 31st of March, that was last year in 23.
That was March 22. We raised that. And then we got to March 23. So we kind of built out the product, did a couple of things. And then we had some pretty large customers approach us. So we had our first $1 billion company come to us and say, hey, we've been looking for something like this for a while. We're in the middle of a competitive RFP. Would you be interested in putting in for it? So we're like, yeah, sure, send it over. Not really thinking that we would get it because we were such a small company, like 3 people in this $1 billion behemoth. But we got the thing, and it had a requirement that our warehouse had to be out of Holland. And we only had a warehouse in Belgium at the time. But it took us, I'm saying, about 18 months to get that warehouse up and operational. But that was our first time doing it. So the second time doing it, we found the warehouse. We put together the pitch, we put together the proposal, and then when we won it, it was insane. It was like, holy shit, I can't believe we've actually won this company. Now, first, we did a really good RFP. We did answered all the things. We were super knowledgeable. We kind of consulted. We did a real consultative sell of look, this is your first time doing this. Let's explain how this works. Let's explain all the things that we know. And we got our first $1 billion company.
Awesome. Congrats. I know we're going to jump into in a bit, because not only have you got $1 billion customer, you now have $5 billion customers. So we want to get some lessons from you on how to do that, for an early stage SaaS company. Aside from, let's say winning the RFP and, getting these $5 billion companies as your customers, maybe what are some of the key lessons learned, like one or two sort of like key lessons learned in building Tipple, in the first year, being the CEO of a SaaS company? What are some of the things that you can share there?
I think the biggest difference, right? So like I came from doing services work to selling a luxury product to now building infrastructure. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is solving a need, right? And like you see people saying it all the time, like, does it solve a need? Yes. But it's not only solving a need, it's like solving a need that is like crucial and that, it makes money as well as the other thing. So it's easily quantifiable. So that like when you go, is it an AI tool for writing emails better that'll save you 50% of your time? That's very hard to quantify what it actually costs versus like building something that creates revenue. You go, well, there's a very hard black and white number there that you can see. So that was one of the things that was probably the biggest takeaway of like when we were solving this need, we were finding it so much easier. It was just like green lights, whereas like selling the gin and the luxury product was like there was no way of kind of going, you need this product, like as in because what's the problem statement, you're sober, like as in that you can't really advertise that, you can't, there's old rules against that. So it was one of those things where we're like going, okay, and you can't explain taste over the internet. So how do you get that unmasked in graphic? You've got to build from the bottom up and go knocking. The difference between like selling a luxury product and selling a want or a need, one, it became like very evident. So when people were problem aware of like, I want to sell alcohol online, but I have no idea how to do it, that became a very easy way for us to come in and go, okay, look, you're problem aware. We have a solution for you. Let us talk about the solution. But for a lot of companies, there was a bit of education because they weren't aware that you could do this. Like, as in when we first started this and like Laura suggested the idea to me of like selling across the border, I was like, that's impossible. You can't do that. And like, it turns out that you can. So it was one of those things actually reframing my thinking on some of these problems of like, instead of it being like, you can't do that, like that's not the way things work. It was like taking that step back and going, well, how could this work? Like, and it's reframing the question. Like, that was one of the biggest things of adjusting my mindset and of actually being able to execute and also be able to creatively problem solve. Because like when you're a CEO, you're involved in everything. So you've got to be able to problem solve. So yeah, like I think they're kind of like the main things I learned, like solve a problem, a big fucking hairy problem that is somebody's job inside of a company that will like pay you to solve this problem, take that pain away. Two is like, reframe your thinking of like, not from being, how do we do this? It's going, like, how would we do this? Like there's or how could this work rather than like going straight to execution. So I find like often like when we kind of come up with a couple of ideas how to execute something and then like run through the scenarios, that gives us a better idea of all the things that we haven't considered. Because as you work through them, you find more and more things that you don't expect.
And in last year as well, you decided to enter the pitch competition at SaaStock in Dublin. And out of 100 companies that were on site, Tipple ended up winning. Can you tell us a little bit about why you entered, and maybe what were the learnings of going through a pitch competition, and then perhaps to the point of winning, like maybe how that has kind of impacted in any way for Tipple?
Yeah, so we were kind of midway through our funding round, so of doing our seed round, and it was one of those things of, if you don't like apply, you'll never know. Like it was kind of like completely opportunistic. I knew that there was going to be a whole load of investors in town for SaaStock. And I was like, oh, look, if we kind of get through, or if like we get like featured somewhere, it'll be worth the exposure. We might end up with a couple of conversations. So when I showed up with a deck that was out of date. So I showed up with the wrong deck. I showed up with the one from the previous round. And I didn't notice until it's on the screen behind me on the first day. And, there's hundreds of people like doing these things. And you've got, was it 5 or 10 minutes? I can't remember. It was like 5 minutes for pitch, 5 minutes for questions. I had to run through it, and I just had to actually improvise the entire thing on the fly. I was like, this is all changed. Let me tell you what we've done since then. And it was just like wild. So that night, I went to one of the after parties. But so everyone was around me. So like I'm 8 beers deep, like updating my slides for the next day, which is like the deck that we've done. Like I sent it across to the production team. They're like, cool. Yeah, we'll make sure that this is done. Great. So the next day you're on like the semifinals. And it's like the quality of people that got through was phenomenal. Like there was like some incredible companies, like they were really, really like interesting, really strong pitches. And I'm going, oh shit. I was like, I probably should have prepared a little bit more for this. Like after seeing the other people pitch, I was like, oh no. So get up on stage, kind of just talk about it, go through the slides, tell them about all the things that we've done. And then it comes down to the final three, which is the following day. And then it was like, okay, we spent a bit of time like learning off the script, like figuring out what I was going to say, where I was going to go with it. The idea then was that I would get across the main points, why this is a huge problem and what the opportunity was and how big of a market it is. I think we managed to do that. So got up on stage and like one of the other companies was I'm going to say like a Series B company, maybe a Series A company. And there was another guy that was really, really impressive. We built like an API sort of business, super really cool idea. And then there was me, but it was just one of those things getting out on stage. I kind of went blank. I don't really remember much of like going out in front of that entire crowd, but I think it went well. In that we won it, and I was talking to the judges afterwards, and they were like, "Yeah, no, it was super close. There was only 1 point in the difference." But yeah, it was a really, really good experience. And then what happened after that was we had so as we went through each one of the stages, more and more investors kind of reached out to us. So they would reach out and go, "Hey, like I see you're at SaaStock today. Do you like fancy a 5 or 10 minute conversation?" And we met a couple of funds. We had one that was like very, very close to investing actually in the round, but it was just so short on time between when we were closing the round and when they had kind of met us. But we got a lot of inbound. So as soon as I won it, the inbound from VCs just went nuts. So I had like so many meetings for the following weeks, and we had so many people kind of just like reach out and just kind of like want to see what the story is, want to have a look at the deck, go through the whole thing. And then we ended up with a very competitive seed round. So we went from having 1 lead to having 3 leads. And then we had, like it was just, we had so much money on the table. So as in, I think we had 8 million quid on offer. So, but it was just figuring out who the lead was going to be and who we wanted to work with. So it was like phenomenal. From like, when was that? So we kind of went out racing the round we started like, we kind of went out on a pre-run on this in July. I didn't realize that, VC summer is actually a thing and people do take August off. So kind of regrouped in August, went back out in September, and then SaaStock was in October. So 6 weeks into the fundraise, we were like just oversubscribed to a massive amount.
Awesome. And you end up closing, it was like 4.5 million on the seed.
4.3, I think. 4.3.
All right. Congrats. And also for disclosure, Back Future Ventures, which I've launched, we managed to get in on the cap table for Tipple, which I'm very happy about. So disclose that we invested in Tipple as well, which actually is part of the condition on the pitch competition. So thank you for sharing that. And let's go into then. And so we mentioned sort of earlier on about you've got $5 billion customers, and you're a very sort of young company. And you mentioned the first one that you won through an RFP, despite being a 3-person company, and again even kind of earlier at that stage, right? Let's talk a little bit, maybe just on some of the lessons on selling to these big companies. I mean, are they all RFPs? Are they coming in, inbound? Like how do you discover them? What are the lessons in you now have from winning $5 billion customers?
So like a lot of our strategy was inbound because we have to do a lot of education on the whole market. So one was like building up the pipeline. So then like building up the leads and kind of like putting out content. That was one thing that kind of worked really well. Two was like going after them. So there was a few that we just went after. So there was two that came inbound, and then there was three that we went after. And one of them was one that I really wanted. Like with like even when we started looking into DTC and alcohol, they were like the kind of the shining star. I was like, I just want that, and I just went after it. So it was one of those things of getting in front of them, seeding an idea, and kind of going like, look, you can unlock 11 different countries. The entire tool takes care of everything, so there's no tax compliance. Everything is all automated. The warehousing is all automated. Everything is automated. So there's that level of comfort. And then also like because we're experts and we've like built this whole like tax system and sort of like have all that expertise, it gives the compliance teams a big sense of comfort. Because like if you were to try and do it yourself, like you've got to get a warehouse, you got to find people that will go to jail for you if you don't pay your taxes in each one of the countries. You've got to find like the technology to link your e-commerce store to the warehouse, to your ERP, to SAP, to all of these things. I would like just putting it all together. And then also the couriers, like as in, you know, stuff going out, coming back, returns, things like that. Yeah, so we just standardized it. And then because we have the economies of scale, we were able to do it cheaper than anyone else can do it themselves. So it becomes a really compelling sort of offering.
Has there been, like, in selling to a customer of that size, I imagine the sales cycle is quite long. Is that the case? Is that a generalization? And with that, I guess maybe a fear of, like, early stage startups that are your age is going after these whales or elephants, right? You know, spending a lot of time, energy, and then if it doesn't close, if you come second in the RFP or they just don't select you, then, you know, you've been going after the low hanging fruit, the smaller, you know, customers that are, you know, helping improve your revenue metrics and so on. Like, how have you balanced that? I mean, assuming you're not just going after the big companies, but what's your take on that?
So yeah, the sales cycle is a little bit longer than normal. I think when you do your first one, I think that's probably the hardest one. And then everything else it's a variation of the first one, right? So as in, you know, if you don't have an enterprise sales strategy, if you don't know how large companies work, like we came from Amazon, like we knew how a large company works, we knew how the internal politics work, we knew that we need to get like customer buy-in, we knew that we need different departments on calls. So I think when a lot of people kind of go after enterprise customers, they're not solving a genuine need, right? So as in when you are solving a fucking huge burning problem, it's finding that pain and solving that pain. So if you can find the pain and then you can go, hey, we've got a solution for this, and like you can get on it, they will go, take me away this pain as soon as you can. So it's like just like that whole thing, painkillers and vitamins.
Yes.
You know, you offer somebody a vitamin, you know, you take, you know, one of them 3 times a day, and you'll, for 30 days, you'll never have that headache again, you know, versus going, give me some paracetamol. It comes down to that. And it comes down to the value that they see in what you're offering, and being able to convey that value. So as in being able to show a very concrete, usable, this is what your uplift is going to be. This is what we would expect you to do. This is like what you should be benchmarking yourself against. And like, if it aligns with their internal strategies. One of the things that we did was we read like reports. We read a lot of reports that the big companies were pushing out. And then when people were calling out what we were doing, we were getting in contact because there was a large strategic vision.
Did anything surprise you in, you know, I guess kind of winning these customers and going after these big deals?
I mean, there's surprises every day, Alex. Like, as in, nothing has been straightforward. Yeah. So I think the first one that we did, we managed to get it running at 6 months. So from the point they said yes, to the point we launched it, it was 6 months. They were very flexible, like in terms of like, okay, cool, we're going to put the contracts together as we go, and as we kind of figure this out. And because it was new for them, like we were very much consulting. And it's the same like with like we've got another customer the exact same. It was like it's a new product from us. But yeah, we're putting that together as we go. And they've been very flexible and sort of like usually you imagine that these big corporates are kind of like very rigid and but they're just people like us. And like their whole thing is like, I just need my problem solved. I need you to make this go away and like solve this thing. And you go, okay, here's a very clear and actionable plan. So we're going to do this. We're going to start the tech integration. We're going to do like define the product flows. And then like all of the legal and admin stuff, once we have this all worked out, we can then put that into the contract. And people are like, okay, cool. Because it's never really an off-the-shelf solution for these large customers. And this is the thing. So when you're selling to the large customers, it's never going to be your standard offering. It's never going to be, yeah, grand, you're on this the enterprise version of the, of the tier 4 sort of thing. And it's always going to be something a little bit different. They're going to have some nuances. They're going to have some weirdness that you do not expect. And then, yeah, it's just kind of figuring that out and navigating that and working with them.
So conscious of time, so I want to jump into the quickish fire round. Owen,
yeah,
what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career?
Probably doing something that is completely diametrically opposed to what I am known to do. So I was a designer, I decided to go do booze and got really immersed in the whole thing. And then taking everything I knew from tech and then booze and realizing, hey, this is a completely underserved market that people that are in tech don't generally go into booze very often. So it led me to see opportunities that you wouldn't normally see, that like you wouldn't normally have exposure to. A lot of devs, they go, hey, I'm going to build a to-do list app or a product management tool, versus like going, this is a huge problem like that nobody wants to solve.
What about the best advice ever received?
Best advice I ever received was like, I suppose it comes down to the work that you do is a reflection of the person that you are. And that's always one of the things that kind of like stuck with me. So it's like whenever I like worked in a job or like, I'd always try to leave a reputation behind me that I was very, very good at what I did. I felt like that always kind of stood to me because like whenever you go into a new job, people had like, one job I went into where the guy had worked at the company that I'd left. And he was like, oh, I saw loads of your work. It was really good. And then I got a job based off of that. So yeah, the quality of work is a reflection of who you are.
What about biggest mistake you've made and lesson learned?
Oh, this one's a tough one. So back during COVID, our distillery pivoted into hand sanitizer, right? And huge, big problem. We got asked by a children's hospital, by all these hospitals to produce hand sanitizer. We went to our local revenue office. They were working from home. It was all kind of crisis time. It was just when COVID was kicking off. We filled in a form. We got the approval over the phone, and I didn't get it on an email, right? And then 6 months later, the approval was to make hand sanitizer without alcohol product tax. Alcohol product tax is $42.57 a litre. But because I didn't get an email, the revenue officer turned around and said that she'd never given it. And then 6 months later, they came looking for 3.1 million in tax. And I then have to go to the High Court to fight this. So the lesson learned is even if the person does not have access to their email, I should have put it into an email and said, thank you very much for your call on whatever time for the approval. We're going to work on this, blah, blah, blah. And I should have done that. I should have documented those things that were over the phone. So that's the biggest lesson I've learned is always document everything. Because that cost me a fuck ton of money and stress.
Yeah, I mean, not to a similar extent in terms of the tax bill that you face and the stress, but recently there's just been a number of things that I've had where it had to put it down on email that wouldn't have been such confusion, disagreement about somebody saying something. So definitely one I've learned again this year. What about hardest thing about building a SaaS company today?
I think it's cutting through the noise. There is a lot of SaaS companies out there. There's a lot of SaaS companies that do one thing. And I think there is a trend in the market towards consolidation. So if you look at employer records, HRIS systems, benefits tools, right? I think there's going to be consolidation of those into one tool. I think you're going to start seeing this more and more often where, like, we look at Revolut now doing expenses, you look at offering other products. So I think that's going to be the thing, is finding the thing that's going to be the killer feature that brings the customers in, cutting through the noise of marketing and like getting to your target customer. Then it's going to market, getting like scale. So making sure that you've got a repeatable sales process, and then like getting people to fucking care about it. Like, as in, I think that's really the hardest point. So getting people in the door, getting people to care and to use it. Like, yeah.
I'm just curious on this one. I hadn't written this out before, but what is your favorite Irish whiskey? What should I be looking for there?
Oh, it's okay. So the Irish whiskey market is like really diverse. So like you've got a couple of things, like, so you've got Redbreast 12, which is made by Irish distillers. Like, it's probably like the pinnacle of Irish whiskey for 65 quid as it is here. I think it's something about 37 pounds in the UK. It's very, very hard to top. You've got other things like the Teeling Brabazon bottlings, which is kind of like a little bit, more interesting, more craft. You've got the Teeling's plantation rum cask, so it's pineapple cask. They also did one with a ginger beer, which is fantastic. Clonakilty whiskey down in Cork, and so those guys have made it all themselves. The distiller there was like a new distiller, but phenomenal whiskey, phenomenal like juice. Really, really like hard to explain how good it is and why it's so good, but like just really different DNA than the usual whiskey. Then you've got something like Mickle in Galway. So Mickle and Galway have an Inverin whiskey, but they smoke the malt with their own turf. And this is really interesting because the turf has a different taste than Scottish peated, and it's really light and subtle. It's got lavender hints, just phenomenal. I could talk to you about fucking whiskey all day.
And another time, like over a pint, but I think definitely some good recommendations there. So I'm going to have to re-listen to this to get my notes and take it. But I have had Redbreast and we also Teeling as well. So both excellent recommendations there. So we've come to the end of the show, and really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you online, and what's next for Tipple?
So if you look me up on LinkedIn, so it's Owen spelled with an E, which is sad. So yeah, you find me there, or you find me at heytipple.com. What's next is scale. Just like we just launched the US, so we just launched 40 states into the US. So we do Europe and then the US, and then we're adding Australia, which is our next new international market. And then I suppose we'll probably do a Series A. Now, the question is, when do we get the Series A? And whether it's like between 9 and 12 months, or whether we just go at the revenue target. So I think the revenue target for a Series A for us at the minute is probably between 3 and 7 million. And to go out, I think that has kind of changed since the market moved in 2022. So I think, yeah, that's the plan.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, Owen, thank you so much for coming on the SaaS Revolution Show, sharing your story with the SaaStock community, and congrats on all the success so far. Looking forward to coming back over to Ireland for SaaStock in Dublin, and hopefully we can grab a pint or an Irish whiskey there.
Fantastic. I look forward to it, Alex.